Hey, what's going on, everyone, and welcome to episode 21 of the Alec Walt Show. I'm your host, Alec Walt, alongside another very special guest, and today we're talking about the Boston Celtics. Brad Stevens made his first major move in the front office for the Celtics, sending Kemba Walker to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Today to talk about that move and more about the Boston Celtics is Kyle Russo from JDS Sports and Review and Preview. Kyle, welcome to the show, man. I appreciate you joining me.
Absolutely, Alec. Thanks for having me on with you.
Brad Stevens just made his first major move as general manager of the team. He made a trade with the Oklahoma City Thunder. He sent Kemba Walker, the 16th pick in the 2021 NBA draft, and a 2025 second-round pick. The Celtics, in return, received Al Horford, Moses Brown, and a 2023 second-round pick. Kyle, when you saw the notification that the Celtics made this trade with the Thunder, what were your thoughts?
Well, Alec, I knew that Kemba Walker was not going to be, have a long tenure with this team. As soon as Brad became the executive GM, whatever you want to call it, I knew that Kemba was going to be one of the first moving pieces in terms of fixing the Celtics. Mm-hmm. Now, I'd actually seen a couple weeks prior on one of the on an Instagram platform that I follow, an NBA platform, and they did a hypothetical like, let's trade Kemba for Al Horford, and that's exactly what happened a couple weeks later. And was I surprised that Kemba got moved on from? No. But it works out for me both ways. I love this trade a lot for the Celtics. And I don't know your take, Alec, necessarily, but a lot of Boston fans that I talked to weren't necessarily as happy as I thought they should be getting, Al Horford, who, works in the system based on previous tenure with the team. Moses Brown, who absolutely dominated you guys, 21 points, 23 boards, and was pretty successful for OKC. On top of the fact, he's an insurance policy in case a Robert Williams, who has been deemed as a, injury-prone type player, you have a nice backup young center to go along with him.
Yeah, I mean, I like this trade for the Celtics. I was a little bit disappointed at the beginning. When we were losing a contract, giving up a draft pick for another team to absorb the money, and then I looked in return that we were taking 2 years of Al Horford, who's clearly on the back nine. But when I looked at this, the Celtics need to go through an identity change. The Celtics need to get back to what makes them successful. When Al Horford was on this team, their ball movement was spectacular. He's one of the best passing big men in the NBA. He's not Jokic, but he's a great passer. 2, the Celtics defense sucked. He's going to set the defense. He's going to be a glue guy. 3, he never really had a great center. Would you say Robert Williams could possibly be the best center he's had since he's been in Boston? Because it was what? Amir Johnson was his center.
What was it? Jaren Sullinger?
I don't know if Sullinger was still there, but you look at Robert Williams, Tristan Thompson, now Moses Brown, guys who could be in the rotation. He's going to be next to another solid big. Plus, when they want to go, 4 shooters, Al can shoot as well. They can put him at the 5. Don't recommend it, but it's still a lineup they can work with. Al gives them a lot of versatility, a lot of matchups, they're going to play situationally better. Yes, he did well under Stevens, and I do think Stevens has a lot to do with the fact that Al is back, but I didn't love getting rid of a first to begin with. I'm happy Al is back, and I do think we're going to start seeing Celtics basketball again. The defense will be better. The rebounding will be better. The ball movement, hopefully, will be better. We'll see who officially takes us out at the starting lineup, but I am very happy Al's back because Al's going to take this team back to looking like the Celtics did a couple of years ago because they looked like crap last year, and they had some of the most talent they've had since he's been in Boston, Brad Stevens.
Absolutely, Alec. And, you keep on bringing up the loss of that first-round pick. And obviously, first-round draft capital is very, very important. But a mid-teens pick, if you look upon the previous history of the Celtics drafting upon, in those teen numbers, there's not too many bright spot players. You have your Terry Rozier back in 2015, Kelly Olynyk in 13, Avery Bradley in 2010. And then there's not so much success. And those are the brightest of spots amongst those middle of the first-round picks. So somebody that I was talking to actually said it's almost like drafting a Moses Brown with that teen pick that you have. So that's not a bad player to get, essentially, for that first-round pick. And realistically, you look at the last couple years in which the Celtics have invested in a Romeo Langford, which necessarily hasn't panned out so well.
Nope.
A Nesmith, which you saw some bright spots. A Grant Williams, which was, I think, a beginning of the 20. So they haven't had that much success with the picks in which they're using. So to get I don't want to say established player, but a player with some bright spots, I think that's solid, especially because of the fact that at that position, as you know, Alec, very well, that was probably your weakest standpoint this season.
Yeah, and plus he has 3 years, about $5 million or so remaining on his contract. He was undrafted in 2019 out of UCLA, which is pretty surprising. He's been so successful. Yes, a lot of his success came at the end of last year for the Thunder. Al Horford decided no longer to play. He got increased minutes, led to increased production. And, of course, his best game of the season was against the Boston Celtics. Brad had a firsthand view of the player he added. So, you look at the Celtics right now, a lot of the questions I'm receiving, like, okay, Alec, we added Al Horford. Our defense is better with Moses Brown added to the mix as well. Our rebounding's a lot better. They were a team that needed to improve in those areas. But at the end of the day, if you want to be successful in the NBA, you need a good point guard. It's a guard-driven league. Yes, we do have Jaylen Brown, who's a nasty scorer, Tatum obviously as well. But, we expect moves to happen. But with the Celtics cap space, like how much faith do you have in guys like Marcus Smart and Peyton Pritchard to possibly take an increased role next year with no Kemba Walker?
To be honest, I think those are the guys that we talk about improving upon certain positions. I think those are the guys that are in a trade package to improve upon that position. I've seen the likes of Alonzo Ball, and those two exact same players are in that trade package to the Pelicans to get Alonzo Ball to improve upon the point guard position. Because we've seen with this Celtics team, and Alec, I don't know if you've seen it either, apparently some Celtics players were happy and favoring the Brad Stevens switch of coach because he actually favored Marcus Smart, which I thought was weird to hear because I thought like once he got this job, I thought that would have been like the first player that he would have moved off from. But apparently that seemed to be the favorite from the team perspective. But Brad Stevens has a lot of work to do, and it starts at that point guard position. The point guard is probably one of the most important positions in the entire NBA because he is the floor general. While Jason Tatum is unbelievable, he can only take your team so far in terms of, dropping as many points as he needs to keep you afloat, winning one game, having to drop a 50-piece against the Brooklyn Nets. Yes, he's capable of doing that, but that doesn't mean that you have to rely on him to do that every single night. And while granted this was a very injury-plagued and COVID-ridden team this year, Alec, as you know, they need to improve upon a lot of positions. We talk upon all these draft picks that I just listed off. These are guys that are still on the team that, from what I've seen, these are guys that don't even get any playing time because they really haven't earned the playing time per se. Like a Grant Williams has kind of worked himself out of the lineup. A Nesmith, who's developing, was a rookie. A Romeo Langford really hasn't found his glue, his niche. A Carson Edwards either, who I thought might have been a solid backup point guard for you guys, but not getting much time either. A lot of these first-round picks spent and not really utilized on this team. So that's what's going to be intriguing to me to see what can Brad do as that GM exec now to improve upon this team because he wasn't getting the most out of this team when he was coaching them.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. He's not going to have a first-round pick, obviously, this year. It's on its way to Oklahoma City, so it's going to take a second for him to have one of those, earlier picks in the upcoming draft. But this is what I was always confused about with the Celtics. They were a team when Brad Stevens first got to Boston. They were a team that identified on playing solid defense and having a quality transition game. Over the last couple years, yes, they've been trying to find some bench spark shooting as well, and that's why they've gone after Langford. Have you noticed in building this roster, the last couple years, Danny's gone away from the Jay Crowder mold, went towards more the Aaron Nesmith, Romeo Langford mold, and it completely destroyed the way this team played basketball?
No, I absolutely 100% agree with you in terms of the direction in which this team was and where they've gone. Another player that was a part of that mold as well is Avery Bradley, who at the time was helping them, was one of the best noted two-way players in the entire NBA. And they moved off those guys, gritty guys like an Avery Bradley and a Jay Crowder, and went more towards offense. And I can't knock them for doing that because, again, that's just the way the entire league has gone. Defense is obviously important, but at the end of the day, how this league has gone is that which team at the end of the night is going to make more three-pointers and which team is going to have more points on the board. It's not necessarily those game, last seconds in the clutch, who's going to be better on defense. It's a matter of who's going to score points. So I can't knock them for doing that. But in terms of completely eliminating the defensive aspect as a whole, which I think they've done, and trying to add guys that maybe you get a spark out of, like a Tristan Thompson that really didn't work that well. An Al Horford who was a big man, but is not a defensive guy whatsoever when they had him and when they signed him. They need to get that momentum back and need to gain that structure back. Again, I don't think any NBA team can fully go back to that because, like I said before, what worked with those guys, especially a Jay Crowder, is that you can rely on him for offense. There's not too many guys in the NBA at this point in time that are really, will give you 15 and give you solid defense through and through. And especially with a limited cap space and having no draft picks, there's only so much that you could do to improve upon this team in one offseason. That's why I think that any moves in which they make, it's going to have to come from trading off pieces within this team. And I think that'll help you rebuild the structure of this team if that's the path in which they want to go forth with. Because, Alec, you know this team better than I do. What is the path forth with Brad Stevens as running the ship? Because coaching, I had the feeling that he at some point lost the locker room, which, is being deemed as that is the case. But now you're in charge of creating this team on the floor. What mindset is that? What players do you see him going after saying, that's Brad's guy, that's Brad's type of player? Like that's my question to you, I guess.
Well, here's the thing. When Brad Stevens was coming into the league, like one of the perfect guys they added was someone like a Jay Crowder. Solid transition game. If I'm Brad Stevens, first off, he needs to make sure he gets the right coach. Do you go after someone like a Sam Cassell, who comes from a Doc Rivers, who has an offense that has a lot of three-point shooters? Or does it go after a Chauncey Billups, who's from Los Angeles, who is on a team that has a lot of physical two-way players? I think Brad when I looked at this team, when they were young, they were gritty, they played better. When they tried to play this space shooting game, it didn't work. Look at Marcus Smart's a perfect example. Gritty off the bench, can play defense. 2021, yes, he played some good defense, but he took 8 shots a game sometimes, and it was end up being a negative. So if I'm Brad, I need to make sure I find the right coach. I need to make sure I find the right coach that fits what he scouts his best with. And I feel like what I've seen over the last 8 years, the defense and the two-way abilities, yes, you still need offensive players, but if they don't have a transition game, this team is useless, and we saw it all last season.
That's going to be the interesting factor, at least for me, because we've seen how this league works now, Alec. If you don't have a big three, you could basically almost write off the team. That's just how it is. And I'm not saying that the Celtics aren't good enough to compete with these other teams, but you saw in the attempt to get a third superstar, that was supposed to be Kemba. You saw in the attempt a couple years back, that was supposed to be Gordon Hayward, and it hasn't worked. So they're looking with the direction in which they're looking, at least where with Danny Ainge was the GM, is they're looking to add a third star because that's what you need in order to compete in this league. That's what's being shown and put out on display, that if you don't have 3 solid stars, more likely than not, you're not going to win. They have an unbelievable number 1, an unbelievable number 2, and they just need that third contributor. Now, can that guy help on defense as well? I don't know. But I think that the defensive aspect, the way this team is built, needs to come from your role players. And that's something that I've also noticed a lot, is that with the Celtics team, there's absolutely zero depth whatsoever, which is insane to me, considering how many first-round picks they've gone through over the last couple of years, that none of these guys, realistically, you could say, count on them to, off the bench at least, to contribute in some type of form.
Like, I think Pritchard and Nesmith could next year.
Yeah, maybe, right?
Grant Williams was supposed to be a defensive specialist. He barely plays.
Yeah.
Romeo Langford continues to get injured. Robert Williams stepped up this year.
Yeah.
But, the Celtics for a while looked like they had a team with roles, with rotations, things that were set. Then Brad looks down the bench, and he's like, who the hell am I going to bring in now? He last year did not know what he was going to get at every player on his bench. And even when they traded Teague, I was like, okay, this should lead to an increased role from Pritchard, and I still didn't even see that. Yes, Nesmith stepped up towards the end of last year. I think his minutes were all over the place. It seemed like Brad was trying to force guys to get going at the time when he should have given his young kid more opportunities. But I think you're spot on. The depth isn't there. The rotations isn't there. There's like players, when you look at the Celtics roster, the best teams have players for specific roles. The best teams can play in certain situations, can match up all over the place. The Celtics couldn't. They could earlier. Now they couldn't. It's led to all these people losing their jobs. One question I have for you.
Yeah.
So the Celtics have been looked at as an organization players really don't want to play for. Does adding someone like Horford and getting rid of someone like Ainge, yes, Ainge wasn't all of the issue, lead to an image change from players to say, okay, I want to play for this team? Because remember, Ainge was the guy that traded IT, which, yes, I love IT, but could you imagine if he gave him a 5-year deal?
Yeah.
Looking back at it right now,
yeah,
they'd be screwed if they gave him that deal.
Yeah.
Well, and yet every single player decided to hate him for it.
That's why for me, the culture is so hard to pinpoint where it comes from and where the hatred comes from, right? Because it's being deemed as that, players within the locker room went to Blake and said, no, don't come here. So are your players saying don't come here because you don't believe in Ainge or you don't believe in Brad Stevens? For me, that goes to the acts of Brad Stevens. I don't think that players would have such a problem with an executive that you'd be so against adding somebody on your team if you really believed in your coach to work out the system correctly. And on top of that, to add a player like Blake, if they realistically thought they had a good shot of winning the whole thing, they would have been forth with adding him, even if they didn't think the culture was proper or they thought it was dysfunctional, because it would be a message of, hey, we could still compete and win. But the fact that they told him, hey, don't even come here, means that they don't even believe in the system in which they're running right now. So for me, when I look at this team as a whole, and a thing that went against the Celtics for a while too, is that they traded IT. And the rumor against that was Ainge knew he was hurt, more hurt than, the Cavaliers thought that he was when that Kyrie Irving trade went down. A lot of people, when that trade went down, thought that, hey, you're getting Kyrie Irving, but you're getting a nice package back. And turns out the best piece in that package was like an Ante Zizic back in the day. And the first round pick that they had really wasn't so great either. And then same thing. He apparently tried to trade Kemba. And executives didn't even want to touch him because of the fact that in the past, same position, same type of injury problem, people don't want to touch him. So now that Ainge is gone, I think that's where the curse and hatred maybe pinpoints from. But again, it's confusing to me from a fan looking in, on the outside, because of how against the players were against Brad. So it's one thing from a fan's perspective to knock Ainge for those things in which I just alluded to. But then Brad as well, for your own players to be against you. If I'm a player, I don't know really if I'm a free agent or if I'm getting traded. I don't know really what to believe at this point in time. I think Horford, knowing the system, it gives you some. I mean, even that, does it really give you anything? Think about it. Does it really you get a veteran presence, but this guy that you traded for, you traded one awful contract for another awful contract. It's not like he chose the Celtics. You know what I mean? So in terms of building up this structure and building up this resume in terms of trust again, that takes a while to do. And I don't know that the Celtics at this point in time in one offseason will be able to do so. And I think it might benefit them considering they don't have much money to spend as it is. And there's not that many cream of the crop free agents out there. So it's not like you're really missing out on anything. But this will take a while personally to rebuild because, again, I can't pinpoint necessarily where it's all coming from because both examples that I just gave in Ainge and Brad Stevens were apparently not liked by other GM higher authorities and even by the own players within the locker room and Brad Stevens was coaching. So I don't know to answer that question.
The NBA is a league where stars move all the time. And this is another reason why I think they brought in Al, because I think Al makes Tatum and Brown happy.
Yeah.
You said it's going to take a while for the Celtics to rebuild this thing. What's a while? Because if it's 3 years, I'm going to be having you on this show being like, oh, Tatum and Brown want out.
Yeah.
Like, how do we get it so... And there's obviously way more factors here, but if they don't stay happy, the narrative's going to change and Celtics fans are going to lose their minds.
Yeah, I mean, once you make Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown mad, I don't know how you turn the organization against them and on your side in that case scenario. But again, from what I've heard from Celtics fans, they're happy that Jason Tatum is participating in the Olympics to potentially be a recruitment to get guys to come to the Celtics, and that'll be part of it. But it also comes from structure. It also comes from coaching, because even at this point in time, everybody's as shocked as they were when that went down. Danny Ainge is out, Brad Stevens is in, because usually I don't think I've ever seen that before. How do you get fired and then get promoted within the organization at the same time? It doesn't make sense to me. And if you were so disliked apparently in the locker room, if you're the owner or if you're the person making that decision, somebody that was some players that were so against this guy, why would you keep him around in the organization? That makes no sense to me whatsoever. Just because they're not dealing with them, why would you leave that guy in charge of trying to make these players happy when he couldn't do it themselves, when he was coaching them? To me, it makes no sense. But the thing that will change is an established coach. And for me, you named some coaches before. The only guy, if I'm a Celtics fan, I only want one guy. And it's not because some of the other guys, professional players back in the day, guys that have experience, guys that get along with players and that can mend well. if I'm a Celtics fan, there's only one coach on the market right now that I want, and that's Rick Carlisle. That's it. That's the only guy that I want.
Absolutely take
Because
Carlisle.
that is the only guy right now. I mean, Chauncey Billups did win a championship, yes, but in terms of, management and coaching a team, has championship pedigree, has always made the Mavericks a decent squad with what he was given. Never, again, all those teams were never, with the exception of Dirk and with the exception of Luka, all the role players that were surrounded around those teams were never the Hall of Famers, were never the All-Stars, but you knew that when he had something, he got the most out of everything. And that's with this Celtics team. When we talk about, will this become a destination for free agents? Will this be a place where people will be happy? Again, that's a culture change that may take I don't want to say a decent amount of time, but at least more than a year. But at least with a coach, you know that in terms of the on-court performance, you know that this is a guy that's proven that while he doesn't have with the exception of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, with the lack of role players and lack of depth, you know that guy can get the most out of those players. So even though you don't have the star talent with the exception of those two guys to perform at an extremely high level, you're going to get the most out of some of these guys that you really weren't seeing from in previous years.
But my question to you is, if you're Carlisle, do you want Boston?
That's where it gets tough. I mean, because you look at other spots around the league, and I know there's about, 6, 7, 8 availabilities right now.
And they're
If I'm Carlisle, well, I mean, I don't want to go to the Pelicans. I don't want to go to the Wizards.
Obviously, there's some.
Yeah. I probably don't want to go to Indiana.
No way.
I mean, I think Budenholzer has saved his job with last night's win.
Agree.
I think he's fine, so he's not going to be on the move to go coach a Giannis. That would be probably the top place to go. I'm trying to think of some other places that have coaching availability.
Orlando,
no. Yeah, so that's what I mean, right? And there's probably a team or two that we're missing here. But, I mean, you break down all those teams are potentially either going to blow it up or have already blown it up. So if you're Rick Carlisle, yes, I mean, this team has been deemed dysfunctional. But in terms of the talent you have to work with and the market you have to work in, it's probably the best one to work in at this point in time. I would say so.
I think the Zion family report kills the Pelican job.
Yeah, it kills it.
Because if you have a job for a couple years and in 2 he could possibly not be there, I think that sucks. We forgot to mention Portland. They're a good.
But that's
job.
Another team too. I feel like they're this close from blowing it up, though.
That's
I really
what I'm
do.
saying. And they're not. They don't really get. They've been trying to get Dame a third guy, or you could say CJ and Nurkic are obviously very, very respectable NBA players, but look at the Nets. Look at obviously the Nets and Lakers aren't in the NBA playoffs right now, but you need an AD, you need a Kyrie, you need a James Harden. They haven't been able to get that in Portland. So if he possibly leaves, I think that crushes that job. Obviously, he's not going back to Dallas, which with Luka Doncic not going anywhere, that could be a good job for some coaches, but obviously that's where Carlisle just left from. So, hey, if Carlisle is an option, I would obviously love it. Obviously, I've been hearing a ton of Cassell, a ton of Billups, obviously Carlisle's name on there, but, I think all of them would fit well in Boston. I think all of them are very respectable, coaching names for right now. I think Brad just needs to find the right roster. I do think it's a little weird that Brad made this large of a decision without a coach on the team already. Normally you want to have all the pieces in sync, but hey, he found an opportunity to make a move. He sent Kemba Walker to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Al Horford is back. We'll see if he can get some other solid pieces on this Celtics team to not look like the Celtics I saw in 2021. Kyle, thank you very much for joining me, man. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Alec. Thank you for having me on, and anytime, man. Anytime.
Before I let you go, obviously, where can our listeners follow you on social and listen to some of your shows on multiple channels?
So my main platform, social media-wise, at Kyle Russo 612 on Instagram, on Review and Preview Sports every Tuesday night on the main show, Review and Preview. But make sure to tune into Buckets, which is on Monday, and Hitting for the Cycle, which is on Thursday. And then on JDF Sports, part of a show called Buckets, hosted on Wednesday night, co-hosted with Justin Kearns and Zach Besaw. Excellent basketball show. We have a lot of fun over there. And that's where you can find me, guys.
Sweet. All right. We'll definitely check out all of Kyle's shows, and you're definitely going to check out JDF and Review and Preview Sports. They're two pretty awesome pages. You can follow them on all social media platforms. That's going to be it for this episode of the Alec Walt Show. I'm Alec Walt alongside Kyle Russo. What do you think of the future of the Boston Celtics? Feel free to comment that below. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Down the Block Sports for more of my exclusive content. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you very soon.